the Hendry County School Board to order. Reverend Brown, will you please lead us in the invocation?
Yes, ma'am. Eternal God, we're so grateful for this time to come together and discuss the business of Hendry County. Bless us, oh God, to deal with this difficult time and make the proper decision. In Jesus' name we ask it all. Amen.
And Vice Chair Nelson, will you please lead us in the pledge?
It's hot.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, before we proceed, could we pause for a moment of silence in memory of Judy Cross McClure. Judy Cross, as she was known, served on the Hendry County School Board from November 1982 to November 1992. And I would like us to have a moment and then correct this before there's spread on minutes these days. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent. She was a remarkable woman. Wasn't she a past president of the Florida School Board Associations?
Yes, she was, and she also was the founder of the Small District Coalition within the MFBA. And if every year, if you'll read the little blurb, it makes a reference, I believe it makes a reference to her, but she was the founder.
Was a remarkable lady. Okay, we're going to move forward to citizen comment on agenda items. Superintendent, will we receive any citizen comment?
Madam Chair, I have no citizen comments.
Okay, fantastic. On to the consent, we'll move forward to the consent agenda. Are there any items any board members would like to have pulled for an action item? Beverly, mark this down. I don't have one to be pulled either, so it's a pretty exciting day for all of us today. It looks like we're going to be moving quick. All right. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I shouldn't be cutting up like this, but I know this is a remarkable occasion for all of us on this phone call. Okay, Superintendent, can I have your recommendation for the consent agenda?
I recommend approval of the consent agenda, but I want to bring your attention to subject F. We will later be talking about something else that is not related, so don't get this confused with what Dr. Mundy's going to talk about.
Okay.
Okay?
Can I have your recommendation, please?
Yes, I recommend approval.
Okay, do I have a motion?
So moved.
So moved. Yeah. Second.
Second, thank you. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent agenda passes unanimously. We're going to move forward to action items, a new personnel allocation request.
Madam Chair, I recommend approval of these allocation requests. They're grant funded and part of Mr. Swindle's grants that he has applied for.
Okay, and then if the grant funding doesn't pan out or at the conclusion of it, these positions.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we have the recommendation by the superintendent. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second. Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, action items pass unanimously. On to board member business. We have the advocacy committee, which was the legislative committee, representative and alternate appointment for 2020-21. I know that we have made in the past, the way that it's been handled, that someone has made a motion for the representative, and then kind of like, when we elect chairman and vice chair for the alternate. So are there any nominations for the legislative or the advocacy committee liaison for the school board? Do anybody want to volunteer?
No.
You got that value adjustment where I see you. All right, well, you know what, I'm gonna go ahead and nominate Vice Chair Nelson.
All right.
I will accept that nomination.
All right, do I have a motion on that?
So moved. Second.
A second? All in favor, or any discussion? My discussion is that she's gonna be fabulous. Good choice, fantastic choice, she's gonna be fantastic.
Yes, you will.
And, so, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, Vice Chair Nelson is our advocacy committee representative. Do I have someone who wants to volunteer or be nominated for the alternate?
Can you be nominated, Mrs. Busen?
I guess I could volunteer myself. Y'all want that?
I'm gonna nominate Mrs. Busen for the alternate.
Thank you.
Because I'm looking at Reverend Brown's face and he's
Good choice.
okay with it. Like, oh, that's what I'm
Yes, very good choice.
You know, that's what we should do, nominate the person who's not here to defend themselves. Okay, yes, I gladly accept the nomination. Is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Molly, should I recuse myself from that vote? Okay. Sorry. All right, I like the thumbs up on that. Okay, and so that appointment passes unanimously as well. Superintendent, can you please speak to us on item B, the 2020 summer recovery and revised DPK schedule?
I'm sorry, where are you? Okay, yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, I can get it. That's part of what I was warning you about earlier.
Okay.
We have two things that have come down. One is the CARES package that we've all heard about, and the other is the summer recovery grant. And Dr. Mundy will talk about the summer recovery grant, which deals with gaining back some of the learning losses that may have occurred while we were on extended spring break. So Dr. Mundy at this time.
Yep, Madam Chair, if I may. So we received word from the governor on Thursday. We had phone calls on Friday, and this is all due on June 30th. So I'm calling it the Fast and Furious Summer Recovery Program. So for this one, we have about $246,000. And it's very specific with its criteria for inviting students. And I can read those for you. But it talks mostly about K through 3 students who have a reading deficiency, students who have been disconnected due to distance learning. So it would be students that we have not been able to get in touch with. And it also talks about 4th and 5th graders that are, they have made a level 1 or 2 on the last FSA and are in a lower 300 school. So I have everybody working furiously as long as I have board, nods that yes, we can proceed with this program. So we're gonna start it on July 6th. And we'll finish it July 31st, whatever that Friday is. And we will work on the curriculum. It has to align with the standards, the state standards. And teachers will receive PD on whatever it is that we're doing. And they will also receive PD or work in a PLC to monitor what students are doing. And the goal of it is to recover some of what they may have lost. iReady is working with us. They have these reports, these proxy reports that they've come out with that shows that according to Diagnostic 2, and when they look at Diagnostic 2, they can try and project what they may have scored on state assessment, and they're also looking at trying to figure out the gaps that may be present for those students based on trends from Diagnostic 1, Diagnostic 2, and even moving some of the progress monitoring pieces in there. There's also a parent communication plan, so we'll have to figure out how we can stay in touch with parents, not only as we're teaching students face-to-face. I guess I probably should have said that part from the beginning. We will be bringing students to the school sites. Transportation will be provided, food will be provided, and this is kind of like an ease into a school possibly opening up at full capacity come August. Questions?
No, sounds good.
Sounds great.
Dr. Mundy, I do, in the PD in the instruction, I know this is focusing on particular reading deficiencies, level 1s and level 2s, in particular in lower 300 schools. Is there going to be any PD provided that would change up the method of instruction? Like, I know I've shared information about like Wharton, Gillingham. Well, these are your kids. I mean, these are the ones who are. And I was wondering if it's going to keep on keeping on with the curriculum that we've been using, or if there's going to be something different.
Nothing had been finalized as far as what we're using, but I have principals right now that are working closely with their APs and their resource teachers and anybody else they can pull in to figure out what we actually need to do. I've got some good ideas from Mrs. Sanchez so far. Coaches have input, but we feel the same way. We've used, certain programs or curriculum over this distance learning that we want to try and throw something in there. And then another requirement was that we also fill the gap, but also front load and get those students ready for the next grade. So, no decision as of yet. Remember, it just came out Friday. And we are, it's fast and furious.
Yes.
We're working on it. You muted, Stephanie.
I think you appreciate you sharing that information, and I'm sorry about the fast and furious turnaround and implementation, but I think it's simple. This summer recovery is so important. You just witnessed a lot of situations where you realize that there were some gaps.
Right.
And
we will get it done.
I know you will. You always do. Okay. So we have a recommendation, Superintendent.
Are we at the approval stage at this point?
Well,
Dr. Mundy?
I really just wanted to know that I had the support to move forward with the planning and the transportation and all of that. I don't know if the actual schedule was on the agenda for tonight. I do also want to mention that VPK the state has encouraged us to do a shortened VPK program this summer. And so basically we'll get in 200 hours instead of 300 hours, but we'll be paid the full revenue for that 300 hours. So those two were the revised, on the revised memo. After the revised memo that we canceled VPK and we also went virtual on some of the other programs. So, but as long as I have approval to move forward without reservation on the summer recovery, then I'll be in good shape to plow forward.
Well, my recommendation then would be that the board give consensus to Dr. Mundy to move forward.
Yes, ma'am.
By consent.
Agreed.
Agreed. Yes.
All right, you got your three.
Okay,
Okay, do we have, any, I guess we'll do board member business by district?
well, before we get on to that, we need to have a report on the CARES Act, which is also due June 30th. And this is the big pot of money that will be about $2.1 million that divides, we are required to divide the money into 12 different categories. And Ms. Riccardi will address this with the board.
Hi, good afternoon again. Again, as Superintendent Paletti said, this is the big pot that we're getting for the CARES Act. The total amount we're getting is $2.66 million, but part of it goes towards indirect cost. Some of it must be shared with private schools. After that, there are 12 separate items that are allowed for the CARES Act. And probably we're working on this plan right now, but just like Dr. Mundy's VPK program that she was just working on, that she was just mentioning, she's got to get this whole program in by June 30. So there is a lot of cramming in of numbers, especially at $2.6 million numbers in a very short period of time. This is money that is to be used basically for the continuation of programming because of the COVID-19. So some of the efforts will include paying us back for I think we've already spent like $30,000 in cleaning supplies and sanitation stations. There's going to be certain mental health care that's required. That's one of the items listed. I'm trying to see what item it is. Item number 10 is providing mental health services and supports. So we're going to be getting Dr. Staley in on that to say, this is what I'm going to be doing, and this is how I'm going to be spending that money. There will be monies given directly towards the schools probably on a per student basis so that they can do things that they know they need. For example, if one particular school says, I must have, and I can't remember what they're called, the little separator stations to keep people apart, or maybe they need a separate set of tables, but it's really got to be on those principals, the ones that I've talked to know what they need to get things done. So that's going to be a key component as well. In fact, some of them have indicated they want to pay for extra hours for either paras or teachers because they're going to be having to have people spread apart more. So they're going to have to be working some overtime. But anyway, that's the other program. I don't know how much, I really don't have any details on it because as Dr. Mundy indicated, we just started getting all this information on Friday with the total dollar amount. And today we've calculated how it is by program, and probably by tomorrow we'll have it spread to the specific line items, maybe the next day. As long as we get it done by June 30th. Does that cover what you expected, Mr. Paletti?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Thank you. Now, before you go on, can I keep talking before you go on to business? All right, all of this deals and it works toward reopening. And if we take small steps, that's what the governor's plan is, that we do certain things at the school sites this summer to prepare for a full opening in August. Now, having said that, remember the one word that we have learned since March is flexibility. So who knows if these COVID cases continue, if we're going to be stepping back to a closure. So we are planning right now as we know what to do. So among those small steps would be Dr. Mundy's programs in July, opening athletic training, voluntary athletic training, and opening a summer recreation program in the school on this end of the county, in Western Hendry County, which will be scaled back, all right? All of this will be monitored at every day and time to make sure that everything is operating the way it should and that we have no spikes or hits in cases. Now, Ms. McCarty mentioned the 12 areas. We will work furiously to get those figures into those areas so that it all balances out to what should be going, okay? Are there any particular questions on opening? I sent you a piece of paper that had a potential. That is like Plan A. We're working on plans B, C, and D at this point. After we did all the planning, the governor made his announcement that schools really should open fully in August, if at all possible. So now we're working toward that. We have done surveys. So far, more than 1,000 parents have responded. The vast plurality says, please open school in August as scheduled. Among our staff, more than 500 have responded. 54% are saying, please open in August. So we have to take all of that input along with what we see is going on to determine how Hendry County is going to open. Now, can I bring up one other subject that I bet you haven't thought of? We're in hurricane season. So as usual, the schools are going to be the shelters. Because of the issue of the COVID, we have to limit 60 square feet per person in the shelter. All
How
right,
many feet?
60 square feet.
60 square feet?
Yes, and we have to limit the number of people within that group. So yes, tell me, we have been struggling with this. That means that instead of opening one shelter and traditionally doing what we do and roll as we open, we're gonna open 6 shelters simultaneously in the event of the need. And that will, first of all, hopefully alleviate the crowds. Once schools start, we will at least try to inform each student in Hendry County, in the event of emergency, this will be your shelter. So that some people will not just all go to one shelter and then we have to move them out. People will have to have their temperatures taken. People will have to be, if they're running a fever, you cannot deny entry into a shelter. They will have to be separated. We will need, for the first time ever, medical staff with us. So we are encouraging the use of EMS personnel and school nurses. We also are encouraging, I've been in contact with the county and the city of LaBelle, but not to see if we can at least get some help from those entities, because our manpower, our people power is going to be stretched thin doing what we're doing. We particularly are stressing, I'm particularly stressing the need for animal control to come into the shelters and help us with the pet populations that we have to serve. So that's where we are. We have at this time, I hate to use this term, but we need to be aware that we're probably going to be exposed to the COVID virus. I hate to say it, but the first people who come to a shelter in my 30-some years experience are those people in a labor camp. They're the very first people. Sometimes that's where the COVID has been the strongest. So we are going to have something called a designated survivor, because if a person is exposed, they have to quarantine. Well, we're using our school leadership, and if we have the school leadership quarantine, that means who's going to help run the school when we reopen it. So we will have one person per school who will not be working in shelters, which also makes it important for us to get help from other places. We will have all possible safety equipment, safety tools, and things of that nature to do, okay, to use. But it is going to be, our prayer should not only be to open school, but that we do not need to open a shelter this year. It is never easy. this year is gonna be particularly tough. So I'll have any questions regarding those things that I've kind of talked about.
Superintendent, I would first like to say, Reverend Brown, I would like you to modify our prayers to include no hurricanes for the summer.
Okay.
And secondly, my question is, especially with the high risk of COVID transmission, particularly like even if you give them 60 feet of space and you know that our staff that is being asked to man those shelters, what are we doing to not only ensure they're safety as much as possible, but is there anything that like, are compensatory wise that, I mean, I don't even know, like the thought of saying like, okay, you have shelter duty and it's almost like guaranteed interaction with COVID, it like hazard pay, or I don't know, like what would make them actually show up to shelter duty?
There is, well, first of all, they would have to, because it's part of their employment contract. But there is a method to give the people who are working the shelters hazard pay. Particularly this time of year, and I'll work with Dr. Egley on that. But we are going to, Dr. Egley is scheduling walkthroughs through each of our schools with the EOC to know what we have and what is available. But, you know, the days of 500 people crammed in a gym aren't gonna work this time. Now, having said that, when you have filled every possible place in the school and the storm hits and people show up at your door, you've got to take them. So it might be that while we make those precautions at first, when the wind blows and the rain starts and they show up, you cannot turn them away. And you have to take them from wherever they live. We may have Glades, Dade, Palm Beach, Broward show up. So yeah, we will look at hopefully we don't have to deal with this, but it is going to be a different beast than we have dealt with in the past. You're muted, Ms. Beeson.
I'm sorry. Do we have a sufficient amount of staff that is required by their contracts to be there in case the city and county or the municipalities or whatever don't want to help, or can't or won't help us out? Do we have the staff already, like?
Yeah, we will, yes, and Dr. Egley and I are working on that now. But my argument with the county and municipalities is you won't need your folks until the storm is over. We need them now. Give them to us in the shelter. Once it's over, then they can go about the business of cleanup and repair. Once the storm passes, then they can do it in a safe manner. So we think of it in terms of this. Those are your schools. Those are our schools. So the manager needs to be a Hendry County person, school person. But there can be other people who could clean and do those sorts of activities. You know, we will have highly educated people running the shelters, and I only think it's fair that the dog catchers be on duty and not draw a free pass. Because it is, you folks have never, I don't think, been in an active shelter, maybe afterward, but when they show up, parents and cats and dogs, which is, I'm not telling the untruth, we don't have the ability to we don't have the equipment to deal with that. And we don't have the budget to buy the equipment to deal with that. So I am begging right now, I will contact the city of Clewiston. I have not heard back from either the city of LaBelle. I just heard back, let me correct myself. I've asked the county manager and she thinks she can do that. Now, she's gonna speak with the head of the maintenance department let us know how many people they can provide. I am going to say if we can get at least 6 extra, that's 6 more than we normally ever get. So if I can get the county to cough up 6, the cities to look at animal control and maybe one other person, that will go a long way in helping us in these situations, particularly since the school building is going to be a shelter. It's not just going to be the cafeteria or the gym. It's going to be, we're going to have to use classrooms and things of that nature. So imagine now, okay, think of this. We have to isolate COVID positive or sick people. They're going to go in a classroom, so that classroom needs to be scrubbed down by the time we reopen it. So that's, I just want to bring you up, raise your awareness level on what we're dealing with for this hurricane season.
I'm very hesitant about allowing access. I mean, I know we really don't have a choice, but I can complain before having to do it. And is allowing access to those classrooms, because I know during Hurricane Irma, the classrooms were defaced. Disgusting things were found in the classrooms. Stuff was stolen. And I just can't imagine having to open up like every single one and just letting people have a field day.
We're going to identify the classrooms, or here's the plan. We're going to identify the classrooms. When the order to open is issued, those classrooms are cleared out. Okay, to the best of our ability to clear them out, because you are absolutely right. We take whoever shows up to the shelter, no questions asked. You say you need shelter, come on in, here it is. So that's part of what Dr. Egley and the EOC people are going to go through, and they're going to point out this one, this one, this one, let's leave this area alone, so on and so forth. Yeah, I'm not looking forward to it at all.
Yeah, I don't think anybody is, but I mean, just thinking out loud with you and expressing my trepidation on that one. All right, going down on the sales. Anything else you want to share on that, Superintendent?
No, but after board member business, if you'll come back to me for one other item, please.
Would you like to go first?
No, I'll wait until you go through the board.
Okay, let's see, Dr. Berg, do you have any board member business?
No, I do not.
All right, Ms. Nelson,
No, ma'am, I sure do not.
okay, and Reverend Brown? You have anything? Can't see that.
One for the superintendent, about the busing, how are we gonna address that? I know we're gonna have to fully open, so how are we gonna address, busing the kids?
You mean when we reopen?
Yes, sir.
All right, that was a bone of contention and a subject of debate. It is highly recommended that we do not leave a sick child at the bus stop.
Okay.
I know that goes against every thought that we think of in terms of safety. But if you have been in the schools, you know good and well the parents will send a child to school sick.
Yes.
Now, we're going to have to try to the best, depending on how our reopening looks, to isolate at least 2 seats so that the child who presents sick is given a mask, and set in that place, and then transport to school and refer to the nurse. Our plan that you have, the one that I sent out, has been approved by Dr. Pepe. We're going to make like the 3rd leg of the plan with reopening, working with the health department. His words to me were, I'm going to be all about cleanliness, hygiene, and how people we can isolate as a person. So the schools are going to be looking a little different when we reopen anyway. Because we're going to have to be a capable with a petition that protects people so that we can observe those children. We're not just let them. So the busing will be that the students get on the bus and come to school. If they're sick, like, suppose the bus driver has a thermometer. Okay, you have 100 degrees, that doesn't mean you can't get on the bus, that means you sit in that seat until we get to school.
Wow. Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, that is our plan at this point. It is subject to change by 10 o'clock tonight, or by 5 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, okay?
Right. So the kids will be sitting in their seats normally, they normally do, or they're gonna be spread out, or?
We got, everybody agrees that the CDC recommendations cannot happen if school is opened normally. That's why we at first proposed an alternate day. That gives us the closest to being able to maintain population on the bus. Now, at our meeting or at our announcement in our teleconference last week, that is not the favored position of the state. However, if people say that they're willing to do that, we can make the argument that this is what Henry County is going to do based on these factors, this evidence, this survey results, and so on and so forth. But that's why I told you right now, it's overwhelmingly, it's not more than 50% among the parents, but among the choices, it's 42.4%. Go back in August. I do need Mr. Adams to help me with the Spanish surveys so I can go through those. And I will share all those results. It's still open, okay? It's still open. So that's why you don't have it right now.
Wow, all right, well, thank you very much. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I wanted to ask the board if to please have the superintendent Bloody put salary schedules on the agenda for next week. And the reason why I'm asking this is, it's my first year as chairman. So this is the first year that I got to sign administrative contracts. And when I did, I found what I felt to be discrepancies in how people, how in their contracts and how much people were being paid based on their years of experience. And, after conversations and for example, we had a first year principal come in making, with no prior principal experience, making top end, level 5 step. And then we had a principal who's had more actual principalship experience who was making less than that person. And when I went, and the superintendent and I discussed it along with Mr. Seeley, and what it showed me was that we, some of the numbers that I don't think that we all exactly knew what those numbers were. And the language in these salary schedules permit bringing, I always thought, and let's use a principalship as an example. You can be an assistant principal for 30 years, but when you become a principal, you come in at ground floor, like step 1. And it's permitting you to use your years of experience to get to top level pay based on a job qualification you may have had as an assistant principal. Like, you're allowed to use that experience in the pay scale. And I think that the salaries were a lot different than what I expected based on like the steps. And I would like all of us to be able to sit down and look at these at the same time and have that conversation.
Yeah, and if I can clarify, you want the administrative salary schedule, because the instructional is bargained.
Yes.
Okay, so let's work at that. Here's what happened when we had differentiated pay that came in, or performance pay. It happened to the teachers, then there was a requirement for the administrators. This was bound to happen, and it was bound to be, we all knew it was not going to be fair, but we kept rolling along with it. So, like back in the day, it used to be same job, same responsibility, same salary. So that if you get a position of principal at LaBelle Elementary, you retired, the person coming after you got the same pay, same job, same responsibilities. Then there was then there was a gradation of steps that went in so that you should start at 1. So what Ms. Busa was saying, an AP for 30 years comes in as a principal and starts at level 1, making less than the veteran principal had made. It does not prohibit, and this is stuff that you folks can look at and say, here's what we need to do. It does not prohibit the superintendent from saying to a person who has, because it specifically says assistant principal or principal experience. So to close the deal on a principal, I might say, okay, I'll move you to number 5. Everything I've done or that is there is according to the salary schedule. But yeah, I think we need to bring that up and you folks need to look at it. And Mr. Seeley needs to make sure before we do that, that differentiated pay is not still a requirement in the law. This year, it's similar to the teachers who get a 1% or a 5% based on their evaluation, except that the teacher was automatic. With an administrator, it's not automatic. So, sometimes the budgets are a little bit lean, we skip over it. We don't have to, and I'm not saying we should, but that's just what happened. But yeah, we'll get it to you.
I just want to make sure that our, there's equity in the way that we're compensating people, and it was very disturbing to me to see people entering new positions at higher levels, past a 1 or a 2, because they're bringing in experience from a position that was kind of like in the pipeline for that. If you're going to be, we'll go back to principals. I know your assistant principal experience is important, but it's not the same as principal experience, prior principal experience, and that's why in the levels of those pay, once as you advance through those, that's to account for the experience and the knowledge that you've gained in that position. So I definitely want to look at those, and the superintendent can put that on the agenda for discussion. I would appreciate that tremendously. Another thing I am curious about is social promotion this year, and any numbers of students who may have been promoted when they did not meet the academic requirements of that particular year, and if that is happening in the district. Is there anybody who can answer that for me?
We can do this, and remember the directive has been to us from the state to operate giving the students dignity and grace. I have talked to the principals almost till I am blue in the face about the issue of holding students back, particularly since some of our most vulnerable children have been out of the classroom since March. That is what we're trying to do with the money that's coming from the state. Now, it's happening at the elementary level. What also happens is it happens at the middle school level, but only for those students who had been, and this is unfair, if the student had been promoted or been retained once in their prior year's experience, in the 7th grade, they were put in some sort of issue where they could take high school credit, and if they pass that high school credit, get a double promotion. That violates what the state says we should do. Yet all the while, when we say that students must pass, and just do the numbers in your head, the certain core curriculum before they're promoted on, we have students who are promoted on from middle to the high school who don't meet that, and they have been doing that since this law was passed. But pretty soon, you're going to run out of resources it's a double-edged sword. So while we say that there is no social promotion in this particular year, particularly at the elementary level, we are moving students up. unless there is a conference with the parents and the school administration to retain those children. But retentions don't do what you think they do. They tend to make the student fall farther and farther behind. Now, this summer, the middle schools are gonna have to work on another plan for promotion, because I've thrown this plan that they had out. So they're gonna have to come up with something else. Okay, but be prepared that sometimes we do what we do for what is best for the children. You don't necessarily want a 16 or 17-year-old on a middle school campus. And sometimes it's a matter of the resources. Do we have what it takes to do? Sometimes, using to speak to the reading issue, okay, if what we have is not working, giving them a second or third dose of it isn't gonna work either. Okay, so that is another argument for looking at a new reading program. Just so that's what we're doing, but this is the year not to say, particularly when everybody is telling us to say, use dignity and grace to help these students along, because we're all aware that across the grade levels that there are students who have, while our teachers and the students did do well with distance learning, there are still huge gaps in every grade level where the students have fallen behind. And they may have been, well, we say social promoted at the high school, and they earned credit, where there was some gimme on earning that particular credit. If they were passing like through March and did some of their work through the end of the year and did what was there, that they perhaps earned that credit. But this isn't the year to get really upset about it. And the principals knew that. They should have known that, because we've talked about it numerous times.
Well, my question stems from a particular situation when a child, and I'll just put it out there. I don't think it's really any big surprise to anybody, but you know, my son, he did not log in because he's taken 2 courses at a public school, and he did not log in one time after extended spring break started, not once. Because I keep data to justify credits elsewhere, and that child got an A in both classes. And that A that he got for the last semester that he did not log into any of his courses one time boosted his grades, his legitimate grades from before. I mean, his grades were lower, and he got an A honor. That was absurd to me.
That should not have happened.
That should not have happened, and so that makes me think, like, who's getting handed grades?
Were those academic courses?
Nope,
Okay.
they were electives.
Okay. All right, let me talk to the principal about that to see.
I mean, because, that was shocking to me, and that's what got me thinking about social promotion and the level, on, you know, which that is happening. I wasn't aware.
Well, what the directive was, and I will talk about that, is give them the lowest possible grade you can give them. And the particular directive was, if you can verify weekly that you have tried to contact that parent and that student, and there is still no work, then you can fail them. Okay, but not until then. So evidently, the message didn't get to your son's teachers that shouldn't happen.
No, the PE teacher called twice. And because I take my own data and I exercise with my kids and do PE courses, I wasn't worried about it. I mean, he called twice. He called me, and then when I didn't get on board, I mean, it was almost like a social experiment. Like, he reached out, and I'm so proud of him. He told on me to my husband and asked Tony to get involved. And you know, we still, you know, proceeded on our course, and that was the outcome. And so I'm concerned about that. I mean, it's,
yeah. Okay.
I mean, that just red flags are everywhere on that. Yes, ma'am? Dr. Berg, did you want to say something?
No, I'm good.
Okay. All right, and then, our budget workshop coming up, Hendry, have you met with all of our principals? And are we gonna be ready to make some decisions at that workshop?
You asked if I had met with the principals. I've not met with the principals since the first time. No, that's not true. I guess I have. Some of them we've gone over, some of the expenses, made some additional corrections. Remember, the two plans that we were coming up with was, number one, I was going to review salaries because I budgeted people at teacher salaries when they're PSTs. So that in and of itself is probably gonna reduce the expenditure side by about $250,000. The other directive that we had discussed was related to school buses.
All right, so my question is, are we gonna have information, where we can have fruitful conversations and make important financial decisions?
I don't mean to speak for Hendry, but yes, you're getting from me some heavy-duty recommendations at the workshop that will require a lot of thought.
Okay, and my fourth one is I've gotten a few phone calls about people trying to reach out to the district offices and haven't been able to make contact. And so our district administration on like a particular like COVID schedule, or are they back in the office as business as usual? If we're opening up our campuses, we need to have our district offices open too.
If we're opening, everybody should be open July 1. District offices should have someone in there to answer phones. Now, there's someone here in the county office from 4 until 4 o'clock every day. It may not be the same person, but we rotate that through. But July 1, that's part of our reopening plan. Everybody, 12-month people are back at it. Okay, so I can't speak to what's going on at the sub-office, other than I know that there has been a death, a family member's death, and we've had a change in secretary. So that could be the past couple of days where there's been some problem.
I was able to get somebody at the sub office. I was talking about like the district office in LaBelle. But
In the district office in LaBelle, they're having trouble?
that's what I've been reported to. I mean, I've tried to call before and I've gotten the voicemail stuff. I've assumed that people have been like on the phone, or, I mean, I know they're not running like a full-blown switchboard out there, but then I've had some other employees of the district say that they've been reaching out to particular offices in LaBelle and haven't been able to make contact by phone.
This is news to me. We had a call here complaining today about trying to call the sub office. So maybe I just thought you said sub office, but I will redouble our efforts, but someone is in the HR department each and every day, and they're here until 4 o'clock. There's someone in IT each and every day, just about till 4 o'clock. So if it's the ESD department, I think I just saw the last person leave here today, because I've been here all day, somewhere around 4 o'clock.
All right, we have somebody in finance. Anne-Marie, do you have somebody in finance every day?
I'm in finance from 7:30 until 4 o'clock, yes.
All right, well, we must be missing switchboard or something is, because the information I got isn't from somebody who's usually quick to complain, so. Okay, thank you, Mr. Seeley. All right.
Madam Chair, the federal programs office is also open from 8 to 4 every day. Sometimes there is only one person in the office, and so they would have to run to the restroom, or if they're on another line, sometimes it may not, the phone may not get answered, but they try really hard to keep up with it at all times.
That's my situation as well. I've only got one person that stays till for most days unless I'm there.
All right, well, we want to focus on, it's, important to give good customer service and support the people who are, doing the work in the schools and on the ground. So, I don't know what the reasoning for the miscommunication there, but I just wanted to bring it to everybody's attention. All right, let me see. And then my final comments for under board member business involves an email that everybody received today, or the board members received today. And I want to address it head on. And that is that, the superintendent submitted documents to the board this morning regarding an ethics complaint that I filed against him and which was dismissed on June 5th. And the commission voted to dismiss the complaint for a lack of legal sufficiency because they felt the details I provided in the limited amount of documentation I was permitted to submit was not adequate. And there was no factual investigation, and according to the report, the commission's conclusions do not reflect the accuracy of the allegations. I am curious if any members of the board have been provided with the conclusion of the Florida Department of Education regarding the state complaint I filed alleging special education, otherwise known as IDEA violations, because that was investigated and there were 6 findings stemming from 4 allegations, and now the school is required to provide compensatory services to students who did not receive the supports outlined in their IEPs. And I was wondering if that was ever reported to any of my board members. And you can give me a nod or a
shaking
head shake. Okay.
I got chickens.
Well, if it was provided to you, then it wasn't provided to me. And I believe it wasn't provided because that is confirmation of what so many vulnerable students without options and their families have had to endure under this leadership and the terrible situation that are continually created for the board and this district.
Can I interrupt you?
No, you cannot. No, you cannot.
You were not given
out
a
of
copy
order.
because you received a copy.
You are out of order. It wasn't provided to you. And though I'm disappointed in the Commission on Ethics determination, I am glad the Commission provided insight into what criteria they are looking for to meet the threshold for legal sufficiency, and it's absolutely my intention to address those deficiencies. And because we, as members of this board, are not allowed to meet privately and do not meet privately, if there are any questions for me from my colleagues now, please ask me now.
I read everything that the governor said, or whoever said it. We do that again from Tallahassee, I guess, yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Bird.
I've got to
read everything, yes.
I've got to review mine. I haven't had an opportunity to look at it yet, but I will.
Okay. Well, if there are no further questions from my colleagues, Superintendent requested to speak.
Yes, I did. And I want to go back to the ESE issue. We did not send you a copy, and I believe I'm correct, Dr. Staley is on the line, because we knew you had the copy. You had filed the complaint, so you got everything. So yes, we had supplied that. Now, to me, on this ethics violation, I'm not sure how many times we can beat this horse, but I did not have to provide one piece of evidence nor be submitted to an interview for them to come up with that determination. I did, however, have to retain an attorney. And because you have a policy that says the superintendent, when acting in his capacity as a superintendent, is entitled to defend himself and can come up with, and is cleared of all the charges that could result in a fine or other criteria, I'm allowed to ask for reimbursement. And so I'm going to ask the board for reimbursement of my attorney costs. If it continues, be aware I'm going to hire an attorney and you will be paying the attorney costs. The commission said there was no finding. That is always sort of legalese before we may have missed something. I guarantee you didn't miss anything because on the complaint, the only documents that were sent to the Commission on Ethics were yours. I did not rebut anything. So we'll be asking for reimbursement. I asked the attorney today, the one I hired in Tallahassee, for if there were being any further bills. He said, yes, there are more bills. So no, I don't have a figure for you, but because it didn't go into as detailed as other ethics complaints that we've had, it's probably not that big, but I do want to be reimbursed for it. And I have mentioned this, there was two other board members from time to time. So I will be, as soon as I get my final bill, submitting a bill for reimbursement. But it seems like at some point or another, Mrs. Busen, this should stop. I thought it had stopped, and then lo and behold, I get this filing from the Ethics Commission, and that was 6 months after the person who was causing the problem was no longer employed. And I believe that step by step, they did address some of your allegations, including the fact that you said that I made false statements, and they said you did not cooperate. What you meant by that? So that's why I sent it to the board. I sent it to Dr. Egley. I sent it to our staff attorney.
I find it, so.
And I don't think this is the time for us to debate this.
Yes, I agree. I would be disgusted.
I'm not particularly interested in what you have to say on this because it's actually a school board meeting and not a superintendent meeting, but my statements were being made. My statements, you're out of order. My statement was to my colleagues.
No.
I would ask you, do you really think that it is proper for a superintendent to be dealt with and talked to this way?
No.
Did you read the allegations in that report?
It's not important, it's not appropriate, do something about it.
And I told you that I will, and I told you I would.
We need to move on.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Vice Chairman.
The situation that was outlined in those allegations has caused a fear for me to allow my children to attend school under his leadership, as he has failed to protect them from retaliation on several different levels. And so when people want to know why that my kids aren't in this school, well, they'll be back when he's not the superintendent anymore, because those children are not going to be sacrificial lambs.
The Ethics Commission found no evidence of retaliation against your children.
They didn't investigate because I had a limited amount of documents that I could, they didn't reach out to me for further clarification. There was a limited amount of documents.
Could we,
Please continue.
could we, please, ma'am?
All right, and with that, thank you for your further comments, Superintendent. And I hear what my board is saying. What did you want to address, Superintendent? What did you want to talk about?
You brought it up.
Okay, so you were going to bring it up. Okay.
I was going to bring up the fact that I want reimbursement for my legal expenses. That's all. I was not going to go into motive or anything of this nature. But I have been fighting this battle. I finally have some paperwork that says it's okay what you did. Even assuming that part of this is true, it's still okay, and that's the paperwork that I sent you folks. I did not leave you out, Mrs. Busen, so that you felt like, even though I knew you were copied on it, I did not leave you out because I wanted it to be in total.
Why did you leave me out of the IDEA? Why did you leave me out of the Florida Department of Education?
Because
I thought we were,
we've already gone over this. If you need to sue me, and let's be litigious, but let's leave the board alone and let the board take matters in their hands.
Just stop this conversation and move forward. If you two would like to
yes.
discuss it behind, at your leisure, that's fine. This doesn't need to be aired publicly in this manner.
No, it is absolutely a public record, but the purpose of this conversation was to answer questions that any of my board members have, because I don't have the ability to have a conversation with you behind closed doors.
I understand that, but it's getting a little unprofessional. It doesn't represent well record, is all I'm saying.
The actions and the allegations do not, and that it was allowed to go on for so long and get to this point, and that children were pushed out of a district, that's the true tragedy. And what's sad is that I'm not the only one. So I'm going to continue to stand up and fight for the disenfranchised and for our most vulnerable population. And so, but I thank you all for your input on this. And if there is no further board discussion, I would like to adjourn.
No further discussion.
All right, thank you. Y'all have a great evening.
Bye.
You too. Right. Okay, how do I cut off?